Imagine a massive warehouse stacked to the rafters with the late King of Pop's personal effects, thousands of items that have remained hidden away from the public eye ever since his passing. This isn't just a storage locker. It is a sprawling facility covering 20,000 square feet, and it is packed tight with everything from priceless historical antiques to vintage arcade cabinets straight out of the Neverland Ranch game room. If you tried to guess what was parked in MJ's garage, you would never get it right. It sounds like the setup to a bizarre joke: a fully functional fire engine, an old-school carriage and a golf cart plastered with Peter Pan art. But this was his reality. Back when the world lost the music icon in 2009, everyone assumed his estate would be lined with high-end Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and the usual fleet of luxury whips you expect a billionaire to own. But the reality was far more bizarre than anyone anticipated. What investigators and auctioneers uncovered wasn't just a car collection. It was a window into a very unique mind. These rides had absolutely zero to do with 0 to 60 times or horsepower. Instead, they painted a picture of a man who was pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into maintaining an eternal childhood, refusing to let go of fantasy. And here is the real kicker. Just last month, in early 2026, a completely overlooked storage unit was cracked open, revealing a secret stash that has everyone talking. Inside, they found a dozen tracks that had never seen the light of day, along with private audio tapes exposing the candid, unfiltered side of the star. The contents are reportedly far more disturbing and raw than any of the polished documentaries we have seen before. Let's talk about the crown jewel of his fleet, a literal rolling palace dripping in gold. Just a few months before the tragedy in 2009, an auction was set up to sell off some assets. That catalogue gave the public its first unauthorised peek into the garage, and jaws hit the floor. Amidst the oddities, one particular vehicle grabbed the headlines and refused to let go. It was a 1999 Rolls-Royce Silver Seraph stretched into a limo. But it didn't look like a car. It looked like someone stole a room from the Palace of Versailles and put it on wheels. Michael didn't just buy this off the lot. He custom designed the cabin himself, and he didn't hold back. We aren't talking about a few tasteful gold pinstripes here. The whole inside was practically dipped in 24-karat gold. It was an overwhelming explosion of precious metal and shimmering crystals that would make royalty blush. While the exterior was a sleek dark blue, the inside was a different world. Car critics at the time noted it looked less like a vehicle and more like an 18th century French drawing room. There is a famous story where a reporter told Michael his spending habits reminded them of King Louis XIV. MJ just looked at them and said simply, "That is my taste." He wasn't joking. This wasn't a car to get from point A to point B. It was a mobile throne. Under the hood, it packed a massive 5.4-litre V12 engine pushing over 320 horsepower, but that power was irrelevant. Michael never touched the steering wheel. His spot was in the back, cocooned in gold leaf and velvet, being driven around like a modern-day emperor. But here is the part that really gives you insight into his psyche. The man owned at least 4 other limos, but this specific Rolls was his baby. He poured hours into customizing it to match his exact vision. He dictated where every single crystal should be glued and exactly how the gold filigree should curve. He was obsessed with the details. It is a massive contradiction. Here was a guy who constantly preached humility and simplicity, yet he painstakingly crafted the most flashy, over-the-top display of wealth on 4 wheels. However, the gold Rolls was actually the most normal part of the collection. As people dug deeper into the auction list, they realised this garage wasn't about automotive appreciation. It was a manifestation of something far more complex and frankly a bit unsettling. This brings us to the elephant in the room, his fixation on the Peter Pan narrative. At the infamous Neverland Ranch, which has tragically fallen into disrepair over the years, his fleet included things that simply don't belong in a private driveway. A carriage, a legit fire engine, and believe it or not, a Peter Pan-themed golf cart. You heard me right. A golf cart dedicated to the boy who wouldn't grow up. He used this little black cart to zip between his private train station and his personal amusement park, but the custom artwork on it is what makes it so creepy. Plastered right on the hood was a hand-painted mural of Michael himself, but dressed up as Peter Pan. We are talking the green tights, the tunic, the flying pose, the full fantasy. He would cruise around his massive 2,600-acre estate in this thing, living out his fairy tale. Whether he was heading to his private zoo or the movie theatre, every ride was a reinforcement of his identity as the eternal child. Amazingly, that little cart was estimated to sell for up to $6,000 back in 2009, but the weirdness didn't stop there. He also put in a special order with the Montana Carriage Company for a custom-built electric horse-drawn carriage. It looked antique, but it was rigged with modern tech, including a full sound system and mood lighting. With the Neverland Valley logo stamped on the side, it was a bizarre mix of 19th century style and 90s technology. It is definitely not your average rich guy toy. It was clear evidence of a man trying to construct a physical fantasy world around him. This carriage was eventually sold off for about $10,000 to help settle his massive mountain of debt. If you think that is wild, just wait. It gets weirder. Perhaps the most baffling item on the lot was a 1986 GMC High Sierra truck that had been heavily modified into a fully working fire engine. It wasn't a prop. It had working hoses, a water tank, and the flashing red lights. He literally kept a fire truck parked at his house. You have to ask yourself, why on earth does a pop star need his own emergency response vehicle? Psychologists and biographers suggest this truck was another piece of the Peter Pan puzzle. The story is all about adventure and saving the day, and this truck let him role-play as the hero. Deep down, he wanted to be the one coming to the rescue. He wanted to be the saviour. It fit perfectly with his desire to remain a boy, forever swooping in to fix everything. The tabloids had been analysing this behaviour for decades. His total immersion in childlike fantasies led the media to diagnose him with what they called Peter Pan syndrome long before it was cool to talk about it. It isn't an official medical diagnosis you will find in a textbook, but it is a pop psychology term that perfectly describes an individual who refuses to mature. There is a specific psychological profile for an adult male who completely rejects the responsibilities of the real world, choosing instead to remain suspended in a state of perpetual childlike innocence. It is the tragedy of a stolen childhood, a life devoid of play. To truly grasp why the king of pop chose to fill his garage with fire trucks and whimsical Peter Pan golf carts rather than the standard fleet of Ferraris and Lamborghinis, you have to dig into the trauma of his early years. You see, these weren't just eccentric purchases or quirky collector's items. They were the flashing warning signs of deep-seated psychological scars. It was during the height of the Motown era that Michael began to acutely feel this separation, a phenomenon he would reference constantly. This was a recurring theme he brought up throughout his life, according to Steve Knopper, the biographer behind MJ the Genius of Michael Jackson. The heartbreaking story he told over and over involved him working late in a recording studio, looking out the window at children playing across the street and feeling a devastating yearning to join them instead of working like an adult. The reality was that Michael Jackson had already cemented a legendary career long before he was even old enough for high school. While the Jackson 5 were a massive global sensation, Michael confessed that he never had the opportunity to just do the fun, silly things that normal kids do. Jackson once described his upbringing with a heavy heart, noting that while other children were out riding bikes and goofing around, he was trapped inside performing recording and being moulded into a commercial product. Looming over all of this was his father, Joe Jackson, a man notorious for his abusive and iron-fisted management style. After surviving such a brutal upbringing where he was forced to be a star, it makes perfect sense that as he aged, he desperately wanted to regress into the safety of childhood. He famously named his sprawling estate the Neverland Ranch, and it was not uncommon for the superstar to literally dress up as Peter Pan. Jackson first laid eyes on the property back in 1983 while visiting Paul McCartney, who was staying there during the filming of the Say, Say, Say music video. According to his sister LaToya, the moment Michael saw the land, he expressed a burning desire to own that property one day. It took 5 years, but by 1988 he made that dream a reality. The property was originally known as the Zaca Laderas Ranch before developer William Bone renamed it Sycamore Valley Ranch, but once Jackson signed the deed, he immediately christened it Neverland after the fantasy island where boys never have to grow up. So when you hand a traumatized adult unlimited wealth and no oversight, what does he do with it? He tried to purchase the past. He bought the property for over $30 million and meticulously transformed it. It became the physical manifestation of the childhood he was denied complete, with amusement park rides, a private zoo, a movie theatre and a train station, everything a lonely kid could dream of. This was not just a luxury home with some nice landscaping. It was a fully functional theme park spread across 2,600 acres of isolation. The grounds featured a massive 65-foot Ferris wheel, custom built for Jackson in 1990 by the Eli Bridge Company for a staggering $215,000. The collection of rides was extensive, featuring a carousel, a zipper, an octopus, a pirate ship and a wave swinger. He also installed a super slide, a roller coaster, bumper cars and a full amusement arcade alongside multiple trains to transport guests. One of the trains was a 2-foot narrow gauge featuring a stunning replica of a CP Huntington locomotive. Another was a custom manufactured private electric train that Jackson bought specifically for his own kids, Michael Jr. Paris and Prince II. This electric train was built in 2001 by a German firm and ran on 100 feet of track right behind the main house. But his garage was where the desperate attempt to recapture innocence really showed. One of the most telling pieces was his replica of a 1909 Detamble Model B Roadster. Finding an original model would have been a near impossible feat, but rather than hunting for an authentic antique, Jackson simply paid to have his own custom toy version created. He had zero interest in the modern supercars that other billionaires flaunted. He craved old-fashioned vehicles that evoked a sense of simpler times and era of history he never actually got to experience himself. This sleek green Detamble was estimated to sell for between $4,000 and $6,000 at the 2009 auction and featured the monogrammed initials MJJ for Michael Joseph Jackson, making it truly one of a kind. Even his mode of transport for touring was designed with a childlike sense of wonder and royalty. His collection boasted a 1997 Neoplan tour bus fitted with individual booths and a king's crown embroidered right into the carpet. Likely used during the History World Tour, it featured a bathroom lined in porcelain gold and granite. Imagine stepping onto a bus and seeing a king's crown on the floor and solid gold bathroom fixtures. He was a grown man living inside a child's fantasy of what it meant to be wealthy, which explains why he also owned a heavily customised 1993 Ford Econoline 150 van. This was no ordinary plumber's van. It was equipped with a high-end game console, a television screen mounted in front of the passenger seats, and luxurious leather upholstery throughout. It was essentially a mobile media room tricked out with multiple screens and vintage video game systems, so the fun never had to stop. It is unclear if this vehicle ever actually left the ranch, considering he bought it right round the time he stopped driving himself in public. And really, with that many entertainment features packed into the back, why would you ever want to sit in the driver's seat? But amidst the madness, there was the car he actually loved to drive. Buried beneath the pile of bizarre novelty vehicles, there was one car that Jackson held on to longer than any other machine in his collection. His 1985 Mercedes-Benz W126 LWB was the daily driver he used to commute between his Encino family home and the Los Angeles recording studios, and notably, it wasn't customised with gold plating. It didn't have Peter Pan murals painted on the side. It was just a standard respectable Mercedes SEL. Under the hood, it relied on a 5-litre V8 engine pumping out 302 horsepower, connected to a 4-speed automatic transmission, a rare slice of normalcy in a very abnormal life. The interior of the sedan was pure luxury, decked out with power-adjustable seating, an automated climate control system, polished burr walnut accents, and a sound system custom-built for his ears. That specific route covers roughly 40 miles going from Encino down to Los Angeles and back again, pretty standard mileage for an everyday vehicle. Once he packed up and relocated to the sprawling Neverland Ranch out in Los Olivos, California, he made sure to transport the Mercedes right along with him. Even though the King of Pop had essentially quit driving by then, the car still clocked some miles cruising around his massive 2,600-acre estate during the 1990s, right around the time he surrendered his keys for good. From that moment on, you would only catch him lounging in the back seat. He refused to ever sit in the driver's seat again. It wasn't until 1981 that Michael actually obtained his driver's license at 23 years old, which is arguably a bit late for a superstar with endless resources. His own sister, LaToya, openly admitted she was terrified to ride shotgun with him because his skills on the road were notoriously erratic and unsafe. Believe it or not, the pop icon actually landed behind bars once because a traffic stop revealed he had an unpaid ticket warrant outstanding against him. Despite having a terrible track record behind the wheel, his obsession with acquiring automobiles never slowed down, even after he completely retired from driving himself following a decade of trying. He was done navigating traffic personally. From then on, it was strictly professional chauffeurs handling the commute. When he finally grew tired of the sedan, he gifted it to a beloved aunt for her birthday, and she showed her gratitude by slapping on a custom license plate that read TKS MKL. That shorthand translates to "Thanks, Michael." A sweet nod to her nephew, though she eventually put the vehicle up for auction following his tragic passing. By the year 2009, the Mercedes Hammered sold for a modest $14,550, finding a new home at the Hollywood Star Cars Museum located in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. It has stayed in that collection ever since, and the buyer received a bonus package of rare photographs showing Jackson actually operating the vehicle. Darren Julian, the head of Julian's Auctions, made a valid point, asking when anyone had ever really seen the star driving, noting that he was almost exclusively being driven around. Out of his entire fleet, that specific Mercedes represented the closest thing to a standard everyday car that the superstar ever possessed. Everything else in his garage was either a stretched limousine requiring a driver or some bizarre novelty car meant strictly for roaming his private grounds. Throughout his lifetime, Jackson amassed a staggering collection of more than 75 vehicles, mostly high-end limousines, and he famously didn't get behind the wheel of a single one of them. That fleet included some wildly eccentric picks, like a 1990 Rolls-Royce Silver Spur, two decked out in a stark contrast of white leather against black fabric. The windows were pitch black and draped in white curtains, hiding a full-service bar that automotive experts joked was used for activities best left to the imagination. On the quieter side, he kept a white 1988 Lincoln Town Car featuring a much more low-key interior finished in grey leather and cloth. Famous for its elongated, sophisticated profile, this limousine was packed with technology that was honestly way ahead of its era. It came loaded with blackout windows, a built-in television with a VCR, a premium sound system, and a privacy intercom, so passengers could speak without the driver listening in. Things get weirder with his fourth limo, which happened to be the exact 1954 Cadillac Fleetwood featured in the movie Driving Miss Daisy. This ride came with serious Hollywood history, serving as the very vehicle that transported Jessica Tandy throughout the 1989 Academy Award-winning film. You have to wonder what on earth compelled Michael Jackson to buy a prop car from a movie he had seemingly zero connection to. The reality is likely simple. He hoarded machines the way enthusiasts hoard stamps, though his specific choices offered a peek into his complex psyche. He even possessed a heavy-duty motorcycle that never saw a single mile of asphalt under his command. The legend bought a massive 2001 Harley-Davidson touring biker model sold exclusively in the States, which was scheduled for that 2009 auction before being abruptly withdrawn. It was a pristine Harley that never roared down a highway, serving merely as a shiny, expensive paperweight in his massive warehouse. While nobody ever accused the singer of being a biker, motorcycles did play a role in his experimental 1988 film, Moonwalker, which might explain his sentimental attachment. Another curveball in the fleet was a rugged 1988 GMC Jimmy High Sierra Classic. Considering the immense wealth and global fame, the King of Pop enjoyed seeing him with this rough-and-tumble truck seems completely out of character. It certainly wasn't a collector's item or a rarity, but it's obvious he bought the behemoth for one reason: it was intimidating and impossible to ignore on the road. That monster truck demanded respect everywhere it rolled, and honestly, that is a justified excuse for anyone to keep one in the driveway. Although he rarely drove that truck, the garages at Neverland Ranch were essentially a vault filled with automotive gems hidden from the public eye. He treated the majority of these machines as museum pieces to be admired rather than functional vehicles for getting groceries. Then, 15 years after Jackson left this world, a jaw-dropping discovery was made inside a forgotten storage locker. Greg Musgrove, an ex-California Highway Patrol officer who reinvented himself as a treasure-hunting, stay-at-home dad, received a mysterious tip from a colleague. This partner had blindly bought the contents of a delinquent storage unit located in Van Nuys, buried deep within the San Fernando Valley. The locker was registered to Brian Loren, a once prominent music producer and vocalist who has since practically vanished from the public radar. Musgrove noted that Loren is arguably most famous for penning and producing the massive 1990 Simpsons smash hit, Do the Bartman. Jackson actually provided vocals on Loren's 1992 track To Satisfy You, cementing their professional relationship. More significantly, Loren spent the late 80s and early 90s in the studio with Michael crafting beats and tracks for the projects that eventually evolved into the Dangerous album. When Musgrove finally cracked the door to catalogue the dusty boxes, what he uncovered inside was enough to leave him completely speechless. Imagine stumbling upon a literal goldmine of pop history. We are talking about a dozen never-before-heard tracks from the king of pop himself, laid down during those peak creative years, right before the Dangerous album exploded onto the scene between 1989 and 1991. Abandoned in a dusty storage unit, these weren't just any old mixtapes. We are looking at a collection of cassettes and DAT tapes holding not just those 12 phantom songs, but intimate, raw studio chatter between Michael and his collaborator, Brian Loren, breaking down the magic as it happened. Let that sink in for a second. 12 completely unreleased Michael Jackson masterpieces that the world has been sleeping on. This isn't common knowledge, folks. I have scoured every deep web fan forum and obsession site out there. Sure, whispers of a few of these tracks have floated around the rumour mill. Maybe a grainy snippet leaked here or there, but the full package, total ghost town. Musgrove spilled the tea to the Hollywood Reporter, confirming that a couple of these gems are completely fresh virgin audio that has never seen the light of day in any corner of the globe. But honestly, the music itself might actually play second fiddle to the real treasure here. Listening to these tapes gave Musgrove literal chills, the kind of goosebumps you get when you realise you are eavesdropping on history that no other human ear has ever witnessed. That is exactly how he described the experience to the Hollywood Reporter. Getting to hear Michael actually speak, not performing, just vibing, cracking jokes and going back and forth in the booth, that is a level of cool that money just cannot buy. These tapes are a direct window into the studio. We are talking about unguarded banter, genuine laughter and deep dive discussions on his creative flow. You hear him painting his sonic vision, directing exactly what he needed from specific beats and workshopping melodies in real time. Forget the whispery, polished interview persona we saw on TV. This wasn't the media-trained Michael walking on eggshells with careful PR phrases. This was the man behind the mask, a real artist behind closed doors, totally comfortable with a producer he trusted, letting his guard down and just being a musical genius at work. And if the audio wasn't enough, the track list itself drops some major bombshells about what was going on in his head. Take the track title, Don't Believe It, for instance. It feels like a direct clapback at the absolute circus of rumours that were swirling around the Jackson name constantly during that era. Then you have 7 digits, a chilling reference to the toe tag numbers assigned to anonymous bodies in the morgue. And get this, Truth on Youth, a track where Michael actually raps side by side with the legendary LL Cool J. Don't Believe It is practically an anthem against the gossip. Remember, we are talking 1989 to 1991 here. This was the exact tipping point where the public narrative started getting weird and the tabloids were absolutely feasting on every eccentric story they could invent about him. It seems pretty obvious that the song was his way of addressing the wild fabrication machine that the media had become. The vibe and production style line up perfectly with the New Jack Swing and aggressive pop sounds he was experimenting with during those sessions. But let's circle back to Seven Digits because that title is haunting, a song specifically about morgue identification tags. You can actually hear Michael on the tape breaking down the concept, explaining that it references the cold, dehumanising ID number a corpse gets at the morgue. That is incredibly dark stuff. It is beyond dark. It is existential. He was clearly wrestling with thoughts of mortality, the fear of being reduced to nothing but a statistic stripped of all the glitz and glamour. Decades before he actually passed, he was already meditating on the grim reality of what it means to be just another body on a slab devoid of fame or identity. On a lighter but equally shocking note, the most fascinating cut has to be Truth on Youth. We are looking at a legit rap duet between the King of Pop and LL Cool J. LL has mentioned in passing over the years that they spent time in the studio confirming that these secret sessions actually went down. The track is a standout for a million reasons, but primarily because it features Michael spitting bars. It is rare enough to hear MJ rap, but a full-blown secret collaboration with a hip-hop icon like LL Cool J that the world completely missed, that is mind-blowing. That is a massive chunk of music history just sitting there collecting dust, and that brings us to the absolute tragedy of this situation. Here is where the story takes a gut-wrenching turn. Musgrove did the right thing and reached out to the Michael Jackson estate to offer them first dibs on the tapes. The estate apparently did their own deep dive into the archives, verified what was what, and then shockingly declined to buy the tapes. They didn't give a specific reason why. However, they did hand him an official letter confirming that the estate makes zero claim to the ownership of the physical cassettes themselves. But here is the kicker, and it is a big one. The letter explicitly states that while Musgrove or anyone he sells to owns the plastic and tape, they absolutely do not own the copyright to the recordings or the songwriting compositions. That power belongs 100% to the estate. Let me translate the legalese for you. These songs are locked in a cage and can never be released to the public for profit. The estate clarified to The Hollywood Reporter that these aren't exactly lost tracks to them, claiming the master recordings have been sitting safely in their vaults the entire time. So essentially the estate has had high quality copies of this music all along. They didn't need Musgrove's tapes because they were already sitting on the gold. But that begs the massive question. They have had them for 30 years and chose never to release them. Why? What is really on those tapes that the estate is so desperate to keep from our ears? Is it the candid conversations? Do the lyrics expose a little too much about his fragile mental state at the time? It sounds like we are dealing with an unfiltered, raw version of Michael that clashes with the meticulously polished image they want to preserve. So we are left in this bizarre stalemate where the estate says, keep the tapes, we don't want them. But also, you can never let anyone hear the music on them. Experts estimate these unearthed recordings could be worth millions of dollars, and they were even being prepped for a high-profile auction. But honestly, what is the point of holding an asset worth millions if you are legally handcuffed? You can't sell the rights, you can't stream it, you can't share it. All you can do is sit in a room and listen to it alone. Musgrove tried his best to shop the collection around to big-time buyers and elite auction houses, hoping someone would bite. But the estate's ironclad stance created a legal dead end. These recordings exist in a purgatory where you can physically own the history, but you can never monetize it or let the world enjoy it. Commercially speaking, they are essentially elaborate paperweights, but culturally they are priceless artifacts that reveal the truth. We are talking about the most famous human being to ever walk the planet, and the irony here is suffocating. We have actual evidence of Michael Jackson just being a human being, unguarded, real and alive, and thanks to legal tape and image protection, it is destined to rot in silence forever. It wasn't just about the masks or the glitzy stage outfits. The man spent his entire existence concealing his true self behind the fortified gates of Neverland Ranch. Let that sink in for a moment. Michael Jackson didn't just miss his youth. He dedicated every waking second of his adult life to artificially manufacturing the childhood he was denied. His garage wasn't filled with typical luxury rides. Instead, it was packed with real-life fire engines and custom golf carts themed after Peter Pan turning his home into a shrine for lost innocence. He constantly kept children in his orbit, likely because they were living, breathing reminders of the carefree years that the industry had ruthlessly stolen from him. We are talking about a man who dropped a staggering $450,000 on a single fire truck just to throw parties for sick kids, desperately attempting to play the superhero saviour he never had growing up. But strip away the fairy tale facade and you find a deeply tormented soul, a man who penned haunting lyrics about being reduced to nothing more than a tag number inside a cold, sterile morgue. He felt cornered, forced to use his music as a shield against the relentless tabloid assaults, writing tracks like Don't Believe It, just to scream his truth into the void. He physically couldn't handle the reality of being a grown-up because accepting adulthood meant admitting that the little boy from Gary, Indiana was gone forever. The tragedy reached its peak in June 2009 when the icon suffered fatal cardiac arrest, his body finally giving out under the weight of the powerful anaesthetic propofol. This wasn't just popping a pill for a bad night's rest. His personal physician was administering full-blown surgical anaesthesia just to help him close his eyes. That paints a terrifying picture of a man so tortured, so terrified of his own thoughts, that he needed to be medically knocked into a coma every single night just to find peace. The propofol drip became his nightly ritual, a chemical escape hatch from reality, showcasing a level of despair and loneliness that the average person couldn't even begin to fathom. Before the world mourned him, we almost got a peek behind the curtain in February 2009 when a massive auction promised to reveal the secrets hidden in his garage. It was set to be a spectacle featuring over 2,000 lots ranging from exquisite fine art and decorative furniture to rare arcade machines and personal keepsakes. Everything from priceless Disney collectibles to the whimsical garden statues that dotted Neverland was tagged and ready to be sold off at Julian's Auctions in Beverly Hills. But the drama wasn't over. In mid-April, Jackson suddenly reversed course, slapping them with a lawsuit and demanding his precious treasures be returned immediately. The auction was scrapped and then just weeks later, he was gone. Since that chaotic summer, the fate of many of those Neverland artifacts remains a mystery. Given the mountain of debt he left behind, it is almost certain that many of these pieces have quietly found their way to the auction block or into glass cases at museums. Eventually, the liquidation happened anyway. The famous fire truck found a new owner, and that whimsical Peter Pan golf cart was sold off to the highest bidder. However, the ultra-luxurious gold-plated Rolls-Royce was yanked from the sale due to messy legal battles likely deemed far too significant and valuable to let slip away. Now the remnants of his fleet are scattered across the globe like lost puzzle pieces, with his classic Mercedes currently sitting on display in a museum in Tennessee. Even the magical amusement park rides from Neverland have been dismantled and shipped off, ending up at random county fairs in California, Oregon and Washington, sometimes bearing faded signs hinting at their legendary origin. If you head to Coney Island in New York City, you might unknowingly ride the Dragon Wagon, a children's coaster that once entertained the King of Pop himself. The massive Sea Dragon swinging ship was snapped up back in 2008 and now resides at Beach Bend Park in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Meanwhile, the bumper cars found a permanent home at Cal Expo, continuing to operate at the site of the California State Fair, far from the fantasy land they were built for. Other fragments of his life vanished into the hands of private collectors, effectively breaking up and selling off the physical evidence of Michael's deep-seated obsessions. The ultimate symbol of his isolation, Neverland Ranch itself, hit the market in May 2015 for a cool $100 million, rebranded as Sycamore Valley Ranch to wipe the slate clean. This move sparked outrage among the loyal fan base who viewed the sale and name change as a desecration of hallowed ground. Even Jermaine Jackson, Michael's older brother, stepped into the fray, penning an emotional open letter to the investment firm, begging them to reconsider their strategy. But beyond the real estate drama, what truly lingers is the tragic psychological profile of a man so shattered by childhood exploitation that he bankrupted himself trying to buy it back. We are talking about an icon who literally donned Peter Pan costumes and cruised his estate in a custom golf cart emblazoned with an airbrushed painting of himself as the boy who refused to grow up. He hoarded a fleet of over 75 vehicles, yet rarely sat behind the wheel, perhaps because driving requires a level of agency and control he felt he didn't possess. The sad reality is that Michael spent his entire existence being steered and manipulated by everyone around him. It started with his domineering father, transitioned to greedy managers and record executives, and ended with the crushing weight of global fame that served as his golden cage. When the world looks back at Michael Jackson, they see the moonwalk, the sparkly glove, and the record-breaking hits like Thriller. They tend to overlook the bizarre contents of his garage, but they shouldn't, because those silent machines tell a story far more raw and honest than any PR statement ever could. They expose a heartbreaking tragedy that no amount of wealth could fix, no level of stardom could erase, and all the fantasy toys in the world could not heal. In the end, the king of pop left this world at the age of 50. He died still chasing the childhood he never had, surrounding himself with symbols of rescue and heroism, desperate to live in a fantasy, because the reality of his life was simply too painful to face. Rumour has it that locked away in a secure vault, there are audio tapes of him speaking candidly, joking around with collaborators without the high-pitched whisper. These recordings capture a fleeting glimpse of the human being beneath the superstar just moments before he had to slide the mask back on for the public eye. We will likely never get to hear those tapes, meaning we will never truly understand what it felt like to be Michael Jackson. We are left only with the bizarre breadcrumbs he scattered. His garage was ground zero for these clues, housing 75 pristine vehicles he never drove and a fire engine that cost nearly $500,000. It held that eerie Peter Pan golf car and a gold-encrusted Rolls Royce that was deemed too historically significant to auction off. And somewhere in the archives lie 12 unreleased songs referencing morgue identification numbers, a final haunting defence against the rumours that plagued him, tracks that will likely never see the light of day. So that is the raw, unfiltered truth of the matter. We are not talking about the platinum records or the glittering stage shows everyone knows. We are talking about a secret stash of rides and never heard audio that reveals the man behind the mask when the cameras finally stopped rolling. It paints a picture of a deeply wounded spirit frantically chasing the innocence that was snatched from his hands before he even learned how to spell his own name. Now I'm turning the mic over to you guys. What is your verdict on the bizarre treasures buried in the Legends Garage sound-off? And let us know exactly what you are thinking in the comments. If you got a kick out of this deep dive, stick around, because we have got a vault full of even more shocking celebrity sagas coming your way. Smash that subscribe button and dive into the next video popping up right now. You have no idea what dark secrets are lurking around the corner.